A user guide to using imagery to control anxiety. The following information introduces a mental skill called imagery that is helpful in recreating emotional experiences and learning ways to control emotions. We know that our emotions can have a powerful influence on what we think and do, and so controlling emotions can be a good way to improve performance. Imagery is a technique commonly used by elite athletes who typically employ professional sports psychologists to help fine-tune their mental edge. However, we know imagery can help people feel, think and perform better. It works for people of all standards. We also know that most people seem to do some form of imagery naturally. With this in mind, the next question is, how do I do imagery? The guidelines below suggest ways in which you can use imagery to enhance your awareness of emotions, your ability to control unwanted emotions and improve your running performance. So what is imagery? We can begin answering this question by trying to define imagery. Imagery can be defined as using all the relevant senses and emotions associated with actual performance to create or recreate an experience in the mind. Imagery should replicate as many features of the experience as possible. These include seeing, feeling, touching, hearing, smelling, and relevant emotions. What role can imagery play in regulating pre-competition or any event emotions? Answering this question is tricky as many factors influence emotions. The sporting environment produces emotional responses by placing personally meaningful demands upon you. Researchers have found that imagery with an emphasis on remaining in control of emotions is useful. Here is the first action point, the first thing we are asking you to do, and so get yourself ready. In preparing to take part in this study, we want you to start practicing using imagery. We want you to use imagery to recreate emotions associated with competition and rehearse strategies intended to regulate these emotions. Recreate your emotional experiences and regulatory efforts across a range of competitive situations. For instance, think about when training has gone well or when training has gone poorly. Or think about when you have competed against superior opponents or inferior ones for that matter, and when you competed in front of large crowds. There will be lots of other possible situations. Spend some time thinking about your emotions in different situations. Once you have identified times when you experienced intense emotions, we want you to establish a regular routine of imagery use. This should start with short imagery sessions that are rich in detail and vividness, and then gradually increase the frequency and duration of these sessions as you become more skilled in imagery use. What should I look to include in the images I create? You should include characteristics of the scene you are going to use as the basis for your imagery. You should look for 3 key parts. Firstly, you will need details of the event, where it was, what clothes you were wearing, who else was there. Secondly, you will need to remember and recall your thoughts, behaviors and emotional responses during the event. And thirdly, you need to make a decision on what the event means to you and whether you want to change your thoughts and emotions. The inclusion of all 3 components is important, as evidence suggests this increases something called functional equivalence, which means the imagery is equivalent to physical performance. If imagery is close to a real performance, then such images are superior. The method we are going to use is called the Petal-Lip model. Sounds an odd term, but the Petal-Lip model outlines 7 elements that can further increase the functional equivalence of images in sport. Petal-Lip stands for physical, environment, task, timing, learning, emotion, and perspective. Numerous studies show that following training using the Petal-Lip approach leads to improved performance. Let's go through each component. First is the physical component. So let's get this one going. Remember when you playing sport and feeling anxious. Once you have got that image ready, then stand in the correct stance, wearing the same clothes, and holding any implements that would be used during performance. The second is the environment component. It's best to complete imagery sessions in the same environment where the performance or task will take place. For example, if this is outside at a running event, then do the imagery in a similar setting. Where this is not possible, you can use videos, photographs, or a similar environment as a substitute, for example, standing on grass in your back garden. The third is the task component. This is important. The task being imaged should be identical in nature to the task that is performed. The fourth is the timing component. The imagery should be completed in real time and should take the same length of time to complete as physically performing the task. That is, if you run 100 meters in 12.3 seconds, that's how long the image of running the 100 meters should last. The fifth is the learning component. As you become proficient and autonomous at the task, you should update the imagery in order to reflect this and remain equivalent to your physical level. The sixth is the emotion component, and for us this is really important. The meaning you attach to a scenario and the corresponding emotions and arousal typically experienced during actual performance should be incorporated into the imagery. The seventh is the perspective component. The imagery should usually be completed from an internal perspective, that is, through your own eyes. However, external imagery, as if watching yourself on TV, may be useful for some form-based tasks, and personal preference should also be taken into account. When practicing your imagery, you could address all 7 recommendations for increasing functional equivalence. However, in preparing to take part in this research, we ask that you focus on the emotion component. We would also like you to address the physical and environment elements to help recreate the emotions. The emotional responses to a sporting scenario, the emotion element of the Petal-Ip model, constitute a fundamental aspect of your response to the characteristics of competition. Importantly, it has been demonstrated that imagery including emotions can induce physiological responses similar to those that actually occur in reality. This can benefit you as it helps you become familiar with these physiological responses and develop strategies to manage them. Here is the second action point. Having practiced using imagery to recreate and regulate emotions, we would then like you to develop an imagery script where the focus of emotion regulation is to increase the extent to which you feel anxious/nervous prior to competing. Please bring this script with you on the day of testing so that we may use it to assist you in raising your levels of anxiety/nerves. The information below will help guide the content of this script. So probably by now you are asking the question, what should my arousal-inducing imagery script look like? I would have a look at the written version of this document for an example. I would also look at the Ready Reckoner Excel file we have made available, which you can use to test your imagery ability.